Hello, friends. Welcome to the Wake Up with Gratitude podcast. I'm your host, Julie Boyer, and today I'm bringing a good friend, Stephanie Bell, to the podcast. Hello, my friend.
Hi, Julie. Thanks for having me today.
I'm excited. This was a bit of a spontaneous podcast, but we had a brief conversation last week, and I said, this is really a topic that I want to bring to our community. Now, Stephanie is a registered holistic nutritionist, and she's a mom of three. And after dealing with some pretty serious health issues of her own and with her family, she decided she wanted to be an investigator, and she really wanted to find a way to get results for some of her complex health issues. And what's happened from then is she really loves to inspire and guide others to find that same health and energy freedom. And I've been around, Stephanie, for a number of years. I know you've had some personal battles and some challenges, but I didn't know that you've struggled with health issues pretty much your whole life, right?
Yeah, a little bit of health struggles, whether it was urinary tract infections or yeast infections or just some mental health issues. Growing up and it all in of its own is always a struggle, right? And so things transpire out of that. A little bit of trauma, right? And then some related to even medications such as the birth control pill, and then postpartum depression, so.
I feel like we should draw like a timeline and be like, okay, tell me a little bit about this part of your life. So, when did you start noticing though, the connection between maybe some of the mental health issues with other issues that were showing up in your life? Because I know you mentioned you struggled with eating disorders as well, which has definitely connections to our mental health in a very serious way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've had to really go back in time to actually go, when did the eating disorders actually start? And I believe they started, I think I've always had the mental issue of there's something wrong with me. Why can't I eat regular food? Why there was always a question of food. And I actually can't remember a time when I've really actually ever enjoyed food. And part of that is I was a very picky eater as a child. But instead of maybe searching why I'm picky, it was like, oh, you're just so picky. Oh, you're just so, or I was a sensitive child too. So I was labeled sensitive. And I had this complex of there's something wrong with me. So from a very, very young age, I've always labeled myself, there's something wrong with me. And then my pickiness of eating. And I also had believe it or not, by grade 1 at least, self-image problems. I thought I was fat, and by grade 3, I was anytime, and we're growing. So anytime my clothes were tight, instead of me going, I'm growing, it was like, oh my gosh, I'm fat. And that stems from, I'm pretty sure, and, God bless him, he's passed already, but my grandfather, when you're about 4 or 5, I remember this time, where he gives you candy, or he gave me candy. My grandpa hands me candy, and he's like, oh, enjoy this, but don't eat too much of it because you'll get fat. And so as when you're a little child and you have this narrative that is rolling in your brain going, well, what's fat? I don't even know what fat is at the age of 4 or 5. So, it's sort of, I've always had it. I don't think I will ever be without that from that early age.
Oh my gosh, that, as a mom, and you're a mom too, and just that messaging for a young child, which we've come a long way. You and I are both in our 40s now. We've come a long way where we understand that kind of messaging is really damaging for a young child. You mentioned about clothing. It's really interesting. Even though my daughter's 10 now, and I just remember like how, and this is still happening today. So 10 years later, we still haven't really evolved in clothing for children, but clothing for girls is cut smaller and cut shorter and tighter. And that feeling of like your kid growing out of their clothes too quickly. Like we used to shop in the boys section because the clothes just fit her better, and the shorts. Let me get started on the freaking shorts. But I hear your story, and I feel like as a parent, I also had those kind of similar concerns, as my daughter's growing up. So what did it look like for you in your high school years?
Oh yeah, no, it was always a struggle. So being a picky eater, and also keep in mind sugar, I just want to touch on that for a sec. When you have sugar, it's a chemical reaction in the brain and it's addictive. And so when you have your sensory prefers more sweet food and doesn't really care for the healthy stuff because, it's just more yummy. And as a child, you just want to go for what's really good. My choices in food weren't really that great either. So I'm going to touch on that. But I remember going, why am I getting fat and my friends aren't? Like I always had this fat in my head, right? Why can't I digest this food well? Or I always felt ill, or there was something, that wasn't right for me. But I'm like, my friends can eat these chips. And if I do it, I swell up, or I feel like I swell up. So I always had this judgment on me, again, going back to there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with my body. And then by the time I got to grade 8, and, you have the little cafeteria going and everyone's getting their junk food. And I just started to just start going, I don't even want to eat anymore. I just don't want to eat. And I remember I was it was in our home ec class, and we were actually shown a video. We were shown a video of an eating disorder, a couple eating disorder scenarios, right? They were bringing education into the classroom. And I just was like, oh my gosh, that's me in a couple of years. The full blown. I just remember in that moment self-prophesizing, going, I have all of whatever they were going through, whatever the videos showed. I went, that's me. That's me. And then it was literally about 2 years later that I fell into it hard.
Why do you think, if you think back to that little girl, really, I mean, grade 8 is still so young. I know our kids mature so fast and all that, but that young girl, why do you think she was afraid to get help, especially if it was presented? Was it just because of the way that you were in your family, how you felt in your family, or it's so heartbreaking? Because you know what, Stephanie, you're sharing this beautiful story. And I know that there are people listening that not only have been through this themselves, but they might be watching their own children go through it. So what do you think it was that just allowed you to just stay on the path and not say, that's me. Like, how can I get help?
I didn't have much trust for a lot of people around me. As a young girl, being again, I mentioned I was highly sensitive. I sensed a lot around me. I also noticed people's words. My love language is words of affirmation, or one of them. And so I was very sensitive to what people said to me. I was very sensitive to how people treated me. I was very aware of how people treated me. And then they would, I don't know whether it was inner wisdom or it was just a reaction to my environment, but I would put up a wall or I'd lock up. And that's actually that's one of my coping mechanisms, is I actually will say nothing. And part of it was, going back to family, I was very judged for being a picky eater. At the same time, I was just like, I just didn't trust anyone, and I was alone. I don't think my family really knew me, and I did not feel that they knew me. So why would I share my biggest struggle with them?
Fair enough. Fair enough. Now, this continued for a while. I know you went through some difficulty. You mentioned as well dealing with postpartum. So was that after your first, or what happened with that situation? Because I feel like these things are all related, right? You said you did a lot of investigation and all these things to figure out. I imagine that at some point, all of this ends up being related to nutrition and health and gut health, right?
Oh, absolutely. So going just to sort of do the timeline of when you are not eating very well, you deplete your body of nutrients. Also, when you don't eat very well, or if you deprive yourself of food, or if you, purge food after eating it, which I've done both, it really does do havoc on your digestion. Now, your digestion also is a good indicator and a dictator of your emotional abilities. And so I was able to sort of figure it out for myself with, just honestly, it was, what's that word I want to use? Just the will to keep going. Like, I'm just going, I can get through this on my own. I can get through this on my own, like the persistence of that. But anyhow, when I got pregnant with my first son, that was when I realized I can no longer do the, deprivation. I can no longer do some of the things that I had been doing. So that was my first really kick at the whole, like, I got to eat healthier.
Wow.
I got to change my ways. I didn't suffer from blues after him. Actually, I was pretty good. But still, again, mentally, it's always there. It's like,
Right.
Don't want to gain weight, don't want to do, so I still had that struggle. By the time I had the second baby, because I actually enjoyed being pregnant, which was actually really interesting. By the time I had my second one, I did have the blues after him, but it didn't last very long. It wasn't until my third son, which was 5 years after my second son, I fell into a postpartum depression really bad at about 2 months. He was with us for 2 months, but I had no support. So that was part of it. I had no support. We had moved away from any support of any family. In that case, I didn't live near my parents as well. So my mom wasn't available to help me out. And my husband went back to work as soon as a week went by. So basically what happened was after my third child, so don't do this to anyone who has a baby, but I had family members also come and visit. And my husband was, he was able to be home from work, but it was tending to the company instead of to what I needed. And that was my third C-section, by the way. And my mom wasn't there. And so when everyone left, after it was about 2 weeks between my mom and the company and my husband being home, and then everyone's gone. And I have 3 kids to tend to and a house to tend to and books to do. It spiraled for me at the 2-month mark. And, but at the same time, it was the headspace of, I just got to keep going. I'm stronger than this. I'm a woman. I can do this. I can, but, and then that process, because I was already because there is another story about our son who was ill, our second son, he was ill. That was when I got full into whole foods, cleaned up our kitchen, cleaned up our cooking for the sake of my son. But as a family, we also became very clean. We used supplementation. Not that it worked, but we used a whole bunch of stuff, and we did what the naturopath told us. We did alternative care, and my son's health didn't improve fully, but it was better. Mm-hmm. When I was in postpartum depression, though, whether it was the baby or the stress of my son now in school, his health plummeted, even though we were still doing all the right things.
With the food. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So in that time of my postpartum depression, I was dealing not only with my condition, and by the way, this all happened when that depression happened, the recession. Like, my husband was like scrambling to make sure he doesn't get a pink slip.
Oh.
Right. So there's that stress on top of my son's health.
So literally, Stephanie, okay, you have almost every single like massive stressor on you. And how did you get out of that? That's what I want to know. It's like, so you're in a situation where you're dealing with pretty serious postpartum depression with your third son. Your second son is dealing with health issues that you thought you had sorted out through changing your food and taking certain supplements that have been directed by the naturopath. Your husband is stressed out completely from his job, potentially losing his job at any moment because we're in a serious global recession. How does one go from that moment to this amazing woman that you are today that really inspires and guides others along their nutritional journey and their supplement journey? How does that, like, what was there, like a moment? Was it a person, or was it just kind of over time you got better?
No, I prayed, and a little voice just told me, look up #1 supplement. Because I'm like going, I'm missing something. There is no way I could be doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm dead. Like I was just, what's going on? And my son's not healthy. Like, we eat clean. At this time, my kids were not going to the store getting candy yet. That happened years later, but you know, it was interesting. So anyway, I looked up the number one supplement, and for the viewers, this is the book I came across, which is the Comparative Guide to Nutritional Supplements. And I said, okay, I've tried everything else. My doctor gave me, by the way, I didn't share this. My doctor gave me the ultimatum. He did not want to see me again unless I actually went on the prescription he wanted me to go on.
Wow.
And I suffered 16 months.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And I left that doctor's appointment in tears.
And let's pause for a moment, that for some people, going on a medication is the right decision for them. It just wasn't the right thing for you based on your history, right? Based on everything you've been through. So I just wanted to pause there, because I know for some women, starting on a medication helps them to just be able to even function. So, but continue with your story there.
Yes. And just to clarify that, the reason why is because I've had some liver issues. And so I didn't want to go on a medication. So I went home and I looked up this number one, and I found the book, and I went, okay, I've tried everything else. I've tried all the good supplementations. I've spent thousands of dollars at the naturopath and on supplements. And I said, okay, I'll try this one last one. And I'm only going to give it 3 months. And normally the naturopath always said, give a supplement 6 months, because you want it to reach into your tissues.
Yeah.
Right. And I was only going to allow it just to get into my blood system, because I said, I can't live in insanity any longer. So anyway, I took they rated number one, which was USANA Health Sciences. And I thought, okay, I'm going to know. I'm extremely highly sensitive. I know as soon as usually something hits my stomach, how it's going to behave in my body. I can also feel energy. Like, I can actually feel things assimilate in my body, which is really strange to hear. My family doesn't even believe me. But the whole thing is that I knew something had to give. I'm like, okay. So anyhow, with that, I went on the supplements, and I took as directed on the bottles.
Yeah.
I said, I'm not going to deter. And all I took was the multivitamin. And within 2 weeks, I was getting out of bed without being in pain. By the way, my symptoms were very physical. They were very painful. Like, having a shower was like being showered with needles. It was, the emotions were there, but So anyway, at the physical level, I was getting out of bed without pain. And then I was able to go, oh my gosh, I can get through getting my kids' lunches ready, dealing with a baby, and I'm not going berserk emotionally. I was also able to cook supper without crying, because there was a lot of times standing cooking supper was painful. And I mean emotionally and physically. So I was able to do stuff like that. And another thing was, I was able to not only get up, make my bed. By the way, sometimes making my bed was the only thing I could do in a day. I was able to make my bed, get the kids ready for school, go for groceries without crying, because I would cry in the aisles, get home, still be able to put the groceries away without crying. Like, there was a lot of crying in my life. and make cookies. I was able to make cookies. I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't been able to make cookies. So little things like that just were like, my favorite saying was, I can't believe what I can do in a day. And so my husband and I were like, I'll give it the 3 months. If there's any placebo effect, I'll know, because I'll just go up and down and I'll know it's just placebo, and it's all in my mind that these supplements worked. But after that, after 3 months of having no ups and downs, I was continually getting better. And then finally I plateaued at like, I'm superwoman. And I was going to bed at 10, getting good sleep, waking up at 6, ready for the day. I put my son on the Body Rocks. He was only 6, but I put him on the team formula, because we were awaiting the GI specialist to get a biopsy, but the wait was 1.5 years.
Gosh.
So I put him on the supplements. Now for him, it took a little longer. I took 2 weeks, because I was only depleted at the blood level, at whatever was circulating, to get, whether it was the transit, I don't know what chemically went on, but that just changed my life. For him, it took 4 months for me to see the symptoms, the physical symptoms, go away. And in 6 months, I was able to feed him food he wasn't able to eat in like 2 years. And after that, so the timeline was 6 months, I was able to start introducing food. At around 9 months, I took him off the supplements for a day. Well, I took him off because I wanted to see what symptoms came back.
Sure.
Within a day, or 24 hours later, he had a line shoot up from his mouth, and his symptoms came out on his face.
Oh,
So a line shot up. I put him back on the supplement, full dose the next day. Took 2 weeks for that line to go away.
oh my gosh.
I waited another 2 or 3 months, took him off the supplements. And then 3 days later, that same line shot up. It was just really strange. I put him back on the supplements, and it only took a week. And that was when everything my naturopathic doctor said to me made total sense, because she goes, you need to give it time to get into the tissues.
Right.
So he was within that 6 months to a year to get into the tissues. And go on.
No, go ahead.
Oh, and then I was just going to wrap up by saying, then when we did see the GI specialist and we went in, because he's like, you know, it's the visit before the biopsy. And he's like, okay, tell me what you've been doing this past year and a bit. I told him the whole story. He actually said, I know the works of the man of the USANA Health Sciences. And he said, you have done your homework. And he goes, you should be a very proud mama, because you get to leave here today and I don't have to see you again.
Oh, what a relief as a mom. Wow. That's incredible. Stephanie, I see so much gratitude in your story. I see so much gratitude in there. You know, there's so much we take for granted, right? And I'm listening to you say, like, just being able to get out of bed without pain and go to the grocery store without crying, and because you're in pain and because it's too much, and then coming home and putting those groceries away. Again, I just see so much gratitude in your words. It's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Your story is so powerful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Wow.
Yeah.
For those listeners that are kind of new and they're like wondering what this USANA Health Sciences thing is, you probably heard me talk about it. I share often in the mid-roll in the podcast, I share, you know, some information about some of the ways that USANA can support some of our listeners. And of course, like gut health, you know, cellular nutrition, all these things are really important. And one of the reasons that Stephanie and I came together at this time was that because of her passion around gut health and liver health, I invited Stephanie to take a look at a program that I've created. You might have heard me talk about it before, the 30-day whole body detox, which is a whole food program that nourishes your body at the cellular level. And it's interesting, Stephanie, it kind of sounds a little bit like the way that you were feeding your family at that time and nourishing with the supplements, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And taking care of digestion, and it's, you know, to get rid of inflammation, you need to eat anti-inflammatory foods or foods high in nutrient content and antioxidants.
And I think too, what, you know, I listened to someone who struggled with eating disorders for a large portion of your life. I think, you know, we often have to be cautious about putting people on programs, especially if they've struggled with eating disorders. One of the reasons that I chose to put the program together in this way is that we encourage people to eat until hopefully they're not quite full, but until, you know, you just eat. We don't talk about portion control. We don't talk about calories. We don't count macros. We're teaching people to eat whole food. So how do you see that part as a benefit of this program?
Yes, whole foods can be so life-changing. As soon as that palate changes, when you're used to processed foods and you switch over to whole foods, the just the taste alone in foods you really learn to appreciate, but also it helps your digestion will be run more smoother. Your body will release toxins. You'll just feel cleaner and lighter. That's the ultimate takeaway for that.
And I think your whole story about, you know, looking at the number one rated supplement and then choosing that, for me, that's always been a critical part of the 30-day whole body detox, is because the food alone, and your story just really highlights that the food alone isn't enough. Why do you think that is? Like, why, like, you have a very powerful story for you and your family. Now you've worked with, you know, hundreds of clients as a registered holistic nutritionist. And I know often a registered holistic nutritionist will focus on just the food. Why are we including supplements as a part of this kind of program?
Yeah, so there is one of, because it's funny, because I saw a holistic nutritionist during my postpartum depression, and he was saying you couldn't eat a truckload of vegetables and still get the amount of nutrients that you actually need. And it is because the the amount of nutrients in our soil has been depleted, and the way things are industrialized and they're grown in the industrialized way. Fruit might look great, but it doesn't taste necessarily the same. We just need to be very diligent and understand that we don't eat the same way as our grandparents or great grandparents did 100 years ago. And our portion sizes are also way more. So we are impacting our digestion by eating too much.
Yeah.
As well. And the reason why people are eating too much is because they're still hungry. It's because the food is depleted in nutrients and their body is craving nutrients. And that's what it ends up being.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you do take a really good nutritional supplement like a USANA product, it does help with those cravings because you're especially minerals. Minerals are the hardest thing to get from our soils today. And listen, I'm like a home gardener. I always try and have like a food garden. But again, my food is only as rich as my soil is. And I'll use like, composted manure and other things and organic soil and mix it all together. But I don't know exactly what's like how many minerals and what's in there. I mean, the soil often is missing, our trace minerals. So if it's not even in the soil, it's not even going to show up in our food. Now, I want to encourage people to make food gardens. I think it's really important to have a food garden and to be able to grow your own food. But I will also, in the same breath, talk about just as important the critical decision to choose to add pharmaceutical grade supplements to your lifestyle. And your family is just one example of how that can be the missing piece for a lot of people.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's by far just solidified the fact that there's difference in manufacturing practices. There's a difference also in formulations. And I've compared a lot of supplements over the years, especially for clients who I've seen that, you do a price comparison and you do a nutrient comparison on the products just against the multi, our Cell Essentials. And they're spending the same, if not more. And there's gaps of nutrients missing because there's no way you can get the same formula. So it is interesting. I was so bewildered that would happen, that actually I felt so betrayed by the nutritional industry as a whole.
Right.
Because I've been investing in this industry for so long. Why did this one product work and these don't? And then when I started looking into it and researching, and actually this is why I ended up becoming a holistic nutritionist, was because I wanted to go like, why is there such a gap in knowledge? Why is there such a gap in all of this? But yeah, it just boils down to science and there's no cutting corners, and it is exact and it's precise and it's based on what the cell actually needs.
I love that so much. I really love that, that part of the USANA product is that it is science-based formulas. And I mean, it's had a tremendous impact on my own health and my family's health. And I'm so grateful that, I was introduced to working with USANA over 15 years ago. And I just love, I love the 30-day whole body detox. It's a program. We're celebrating the 10th anniversary this year. Really excited to have Stephanie on board as one of our experts, because she does, when you hear her talk about the liver and everything, kind of like me, she gets really excited. So Stephanie, as we start to wrap things up though, I noticed there's a sign behind you. So for those that are listening to the audio, I think it says simply remain. Yeah. Oh, live, simply remain grateful. So you've got a sign hanging up about gratitude. So tell me about, how do you practice gratitude, my friend?
Oh goodness. Well, when it's just part of the everyday, like when I wake up, I'm so grateful for the sun that's shining in my window. I'm so grateful for the new beginnings of every day. I'm grateful for my friends. I'm grateful for my family. I'm grateful for my health. I just step into gratitude. And not to say that sometimes it's a struggle. Sometimes it's like when stuff is going on, but to always be reminded and go, but I'm grateful that, my family is all together. Or yeah, it's just, I don't know. And I do have little things everywhere, like even collect moments, not things, just little reminders. And of course, when my husband, smiles at me and says he loves me, I'm like, blushing and thankful, type of stuff.
So it's pretty much how you live, my friend, which I adore. I love meeting people and connecting with people that live gratitude, and they're not really thinking about it all the time because it's just part of the way that they live. And that to me, I think is like, it's an incredible place to strive for is, you know, not that we need to strive when we're talking about gratitude, but when gratitude just becomes part of who you are, that I love so much, because then I feel like then we become even better gratitude ambassadors, because people just look at us and are like, okay, yeah, she's just grateful. So I love it. Now, speaking of, how do people want to connect with you? Where do you like to hang out the most? What's your favorite place on the internet?
Well, I'm mostly on Instagram. You can also find me on Facebook, but my Instagram, I'm just at Stephanie_Bell_RHN. So that's the easiest way to connect with me. You can also connect with me at gracefulhealthsolutions.com.
Okay. Well, we'll make sure that those links are available for people to find in the show notes. And I'm so excited, Stephanie. Thank you for sharing your vulnerability. I know that you've had a lot of challenges in your life, and I really love just the person you are today in this moment, this person who is so willing to be open and also just share your passion with so many people, and just, you know, be just such a loving and kind and beautiful person. So thank you, Stephanie, for being here.
Thank you, Julie, for having me. Thank you for sharing all that you're doing and your detox program. I think it's brilliant. And you're just marrying everything together and providing the space for everyone to really succeed in what their goals are, their health goals. And I am so grateful and honored to be part of your community as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you.